Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Dashboard Fridays. I'm Adam from Squared Up, and I'm joined again by my colleague Josip today. Hey Josip.
Hi Adam, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. Josip's joining us today to talk about a pretty cool internal dashboard, a bit of an experiment that he's been sort of working on. Uses our scripting functionality in Squared Up, which is a topic we haven't covered in this series before. Josip, I've got your dashboard on screen. Why don't we start with just a quick summary of what the dashboard does?
Yeah, no worries, Adam, of course. So the dashboard is a PR scoreboard, and I should start with a slight disclaimer that there are benefits to this dashboard, but we try to avoid nefarious purposes of this dashboard, which I'm going to talk a bit more later. But there are some benefits, and all of these have started almost like a challenge in art of possible. But yeah, I could give you a quick overview. So essentially, this dashboard relies on the GitHub APIs, a few APIs which I'm going to cover in more details later on, to pull the data about individual PRs and reviews and timeline of the events on each of the PRs, and then process that data to create a data set that can be sort of useful to improve engineering practices. So how did I structure this dashboard in sort of three sections? The first section is review summary, which gives you, independent of the PRs, really gives you some metrics across the how we as an engineering organization reviewing PRs of a certain period of time. So for example, we got a group of fastest reviews. It gives me who are the reviews who review the PRs within a 60 minutes from being requested to do review. Likewise, we got to the opposite side of the coin, reviews with unreviewed PRs, so those that actually haven't responded to review being reviewed. And then we got most consistent reviews, someone who has consistently responded to every review invite. And then we've got most prolific review, the person with the most invites to review, to do review, most detailed review who have actually, it's interesting one, someone who hasn't just click approve or deny, but actually provided useful comments of the PR review. And then fastest dev response. So in instances where the dev code change was being requested, but the developer reacted as quickly as they could to that particular suggestion of the code change. So these are quite nice sort of metrics where really gives you idea how your engineering organization really responds to PR reviews, which is our integral part of our SDLC. We do code reviews. We want to make sure that the code goes through is thoroughly checked by your peers to minimize incidents of the code bugs or code structure. You need to make sure that it's well structured, and then there's always a subject matter expert opinion there. So we really it's an essential part of our process. So it's often in a large number of PRs on a daily basis to lose the track of how well we're performing on that aspect. Plus the code reviews, if they not perform effectively, they tend to sort of increase the length of deployment. So these metrics that they give us sort of a insight how we're doing over the certain period of time.
You
So
mentioned,
that's quite
so I was just going to say, you mentioned sort of nefarious purposes and that kind of stuff. I can see, I can always see on dashboards like this there are often merits to sort of gamifying work. Everybody wants to
mm,
maybe get the
mm,
top spot in the fastest reviewers, but equally you don't want to incentivize people to leave those like just fast reviews. You want detailed reviews, so being able to call out the fastest review is good. So maybe for an engineering team leader, they maybe want this information for their team, but it might not necessarily be the kind of thing you put up on the big screen in the office, or that kind of stuff.
absolutely, Adam. You are 100% spot on. This is not intended to sort of highlight individual achievements or highlight individual sort of a lack of achievements, so to speak. This is really the only purpose of this would be for team leads or project managers or someone who has a responsibility of the deliverable to sort of a sense of the team, overall team sort of a practices, and then perhaps influence those to make team more effective. It's definitely not something that should be used to publicly show or put people on the spot or shame people or unfairly call people out. So definitely not something we would do under any circumstances.
Good to hear.
Excellent. The other two sections are really summary of the behaviors when it comes to or PR hygiene that we would encourage to do, and then likewise those behaviors that we would discourage. So summary of do more of is aligned with our philosophy. We want to do small PRs, frequent PRs, which in line helps with the code reviews, making sure that it's easy to comprehend the code change, quick churn out, quick deployments, etc. So we capture metrics like a smallest merge PR measured in number of lines, total number of lines that have been added and deleted. Smallest open PR, fastest merge, 6 seconds is difficult to beat, but well, there's always a challenge there. And then last merged PR. So these are sort of behaviors we want to encourage. So we definitely want to see more of these numbers. We could potentially capture those data in sort of timeline, a history of these events, and we can add another dimension here where we track the trends, which is probably most useful rather than current values. And then likewise, some of stop doing this is just the opposite of that. We certainly would discourage creating a mammoth PRs with a large number of lines added and deleted because they're difficult to review. There's linearly increases the chance of errors and bugs slip through the net. So we got largest merged PR there, largest open PR, slowest merge. I mean, if you open PR and if you stays there for a number of days, then clearly something isn't functioning as it should in line with our SDLC, and then the longest running open PR. So as I say, these are really more indicators than anything to use by team leads or project managers to sort of feel the pulse of the team, and then perhaps identify trends if the teams the things to do more starts growing up and then going in the direction we wouldn't want. Then perhaps it's a time for the team retrospective, and see what can be done about that.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you mentioned we mentioned sort of scripts at the beginning of the video. Obviously, we have a GitHub plugin, and it's very much focused on the sort of common stats, common metrics you might expect to get back from GitHub. Things like we index all your repositories, we can look at open issues, open PRs, that kind of stuff. This feels more like sort of insights data. You're asking questions about that data. You're not just pulling some raw information back from the API. You're actually trying to you're trying to use that to come up with new insights from GitHub. So I guess that's why you've had to default to using a script in this case. Multiple calls, custom logic, that kind of stuff.
Yes, indeed. If you remember when I said this was a challenge that turned into sort of exercise of art of possible, and I really want to see what's possible with our product. And as I say, we're fetching. There are a number of API, GitHub APIs to give you the data you need. However, neither of these APIs can give you data in a raw format that you can utilize directly using our web API or modify using SQL Analytics. Luckily, we got the scripting functionality, which I'm going to show you a little bit later, which allows you to write scripting JavaScript as you would otherwise. You could connect to external data sources, pull that data, and then you really, imagination is your limit to combine that data, really fetch, transform that data, and to create a resulting data set that you can display. So that was
Nice.
exactly, thank you. And that was exactly the case in this scenario. So GitHub had essentially three APIs that I've used. First one was a search across the issues, where I would go and say, hey, I need all PRs that have been merged over the last 7 days. And then I would go to array of those PRs. But that data did not contain enough information to produce these kind of metrics. So I needed to traverse through all of those PRs being returned through search and fetch individual PR data using another API. From that data, then I could sort of collate and transform to get the summary of doing more, summary of doing stop doing this. However, the biggest challenge was the reviewer summary, because that's somewhat completely different data set. So you can't get that data from the actual PR itself. However, there is another API called Timeline, where providing the PR ID, you can get entire timeline of events on your PR. When someone added comment, when someone approved, whether PRs was rejected, etc. And that could result in a fairly substantial number of entries. So I found that script was perfect for this, because I could filter, I could change, and then create the data, collect data I needed from the particular reviews. So I'm going to show you how that's being done in the product. So in product, we simply go to settings, advanced, and there's a script. And under the scripts, you can simply click add new script, and you start writing script to return the resulting data set. How that looks like is what I normally do. I normally write these in Visual Studio using Node.js, test this, making sure that everything works, and then I really convert that to a product.
So
So
just to say, for anyone who's sort of interested in trying this, when you hit that new script button in Squared Up, there is a placeholder with some just a simple example, pulling some information back from the Star Wars API. But the key here is that you can make requests for data. You can use our platform to make API requests to bring data in. You can't do things like importing JavaScript modules, but you have got all of the all native JavaScript functionality built in. You can use objects in scope. You can use our page time frame. But the gist is you're going to get some data, or maybe a few different data sets. You're going to operate on it. You're then potentially going to provide some metadata to help our tiles understand what that data looks like. Maybe telling it, this column's a date, this column's a boolean, this is a health state, that kind of thing, and that then just gets returned to the tile.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not starting from the scratch. You got a really good example which you can start building up, which I was very grateful when I did this. And then just what Adam said, you're not limited to call single data source through JavaScript. You pretty much could combine data from multiple data sources if there is a use case for that, and there is no limitation on that. So I'll just give you this fairly large script, so I won't be going through every single detail of that, but I will give you sort of high-level overview of what the script do and how it's being structured. So every script in our product starts with a function get data, okay? And that's the default one, and then this is where you passing parameters. You can configure your script in the product to pass certain parameters, so and I'll use that to conditionally call, give me a data set for reviews, give me a data set for PR stats, so I don't necessarily optimize it to call it more efficiently. So pass those, and then you can interact with the product through API object to return errors and return the results. So the first thing I've done, I really took the time frame from the parameters. So I could, for example, pass the time frame in there, and then depending on the condition, I either fetch the stat for the merge PRs, or I'm getting the reviews info. In either case, I'm calling methods search GitHub issues. As I said, once I go to the search GitHub issues, then I'm using that data to fetch the additional data for each of the PRs and timelines for those data. And then finally, I do some transform by collecting PR and review stats when I do processing. Likewise, I'm doing the same thing for reviews. Now, again, doing a search GitHub issues. By this instance, I'm calling across the open PRs, and then I'm fetching the same PR and then timeline data, collecting review stats. And then before I return that data, the one thing that's really useful, you can define metadata attached to that particular data set. We call it data streams, but it's essentially data stream data set, but we define the metadata. So I could define the columns, their names, and then for each column, I could easily define whether that's URL, or is it a value, is it a time span, which comes very, very handy, because then when you end up in the product has got already predefined formatting. So for example, time span is shown in a really human readable format rather than just a number. And if it's URL, it's a clickable URL. So it helps a lot. So I create the metadata for that info, and then finally you just stream that data set back to a platform, to the product, and that's all there is. Beyond this is really left up to you, whatever you need to accomplish in there, and then when it comes to implementation of those methods. So in my case, what I've done, I use the fetch API, which is built into our scripting capabilities. So you don't need to use third-party library. You already have that built in, so you can go directly. So in this instance, I'm configuring request to go to my GitHub endpoint, passing different sort of endpoints there. The only thing I needed to authenticate using my personal API token, which you can get from GitHub. And then I'm using this to return a data. For example, I've got search GitHub issue. I'm calling GitHub get the data, passing search issues endpoint, and then search query. And then I'm just processing that data, returning as an array or map, whichever really works for me.
Nice.
Beyond this, really, it's just the processing that data, utility methods to process that data, and then format this, which eventually ends up being nice, succinct data set that I can either visualize directly in a product, or I could further sort of change this or shape it using SQL analytics.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I guess the cases for using scripting are massive. I mean, obviously you need the skills to be able to write some JavaScript to do this. But in cases where maybe the web API plugin's not enough because you've got to make either a series of calls, maybe there's some interesting authentication to handle, maybe it's paging, anything like that, or in this case you are just making sort of lots of calls and then iterating over them to make more calls and merging that data all together and bringing it back to your dashboard. Yeah, scripting unlocks clearly some very cool possibilities. There could be a case in this where we can potentially like share snippets of this or parts of this with the community if people ask. But equally, experimentation is often the most fun part of playing with something like this in Squared Up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Just for the time, I would like to keep these short. We've covered quite a lot, so I'll go ahead and wrap us up quickly. This dashboard and many others are always available to see on our dashboard gallery at squaredup.com/dashboard gallery. Community Answers is a great resource that we run as well for just asking technical questions. Again, sharing code samples and things like that for scripts, your SQL tiles, that kind of stuff. That's community.squareup.com. But yeah, check out the dashboard gallery. There's lots of really good, fun and inspirational things to see. A few good ones from Josip. So yeah, thank you to Josip for contributing another one. But yeah, that's it for this time. So yeah, thanks Josip. See you next time.
No, thank you, Adam. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.